Welcome to the Virginia Film Festival and to the showing of Bonnie and Clyde. My name is William Little. I am a film studies professor at the university in this Department of Media Studies, and I've been invited by the festival to introduce the film. I teach it in a course on gangster films. And so what I'd like to do today is first thank the festival for bringing this restored version of the film to Charlottesville. It's a wonderful opportunity to see it in its sharpest focus. And I'd also like to thank the festival for inviting me to come and offer some introductory remarks. The way I'd like to approach this is to introduce the film by thinking about snapshots. The film introduces the characters Bonnie and Clyde in the opening credits through a series of photographs. And so I thought I would introduce the film Bonnie and Clyde through a series of what I'm going to call snapshots. And they are 4 brief snapshots. The first 2 will offer a kind of historical and cultural window into the film and its history. And the second 2, which may be less familiar, are 2 ways of thinking about how one might approach a reading of the film. So, 4 snapshots. Snapshot 1. The film offers a snapshot of a historical moment in America, the mid to late 1960s, marked by tremendous cultural upheaval. The film may be read as a sympathetic portrayal of the Barrow gang, and the gang as an endorsement of youth culture, counterculture, an anti-establishment sensibility, progressive values. Like other gangs in the genre, the gangster genre, a film like 1949's White Heat, starring Jimmy Cagney, comes to mind. The Barrow gang embodies a critique of systems that are depicted as oppressive, such as, in this film, the banks and the law. One might also think of the Barrow gang as a non-traditional family, and if you haven't seen the film, that will become readily apparent. At the same time, while the gang can be seen as an embodiment of non-traditional values, critics have raised eyebrows about how progressive the gang really is. Are they rebels with a cause, or are they rebels without much of a cause? Are they just radical chic? Snapshot number 2. The film offers a snapshot of American cinema at a historical moment of galvanic change. And I offer you 2 illustrations of this. The first is that in 1967, when the film appears, and again, we're marking the 50th anniversary, the production code, which was in place in Hollywood from 1930 until 1968, was in the process of crumbling. The production code, as many of you may know, was the code that was put in place in part because of gangster films as a way to censor what was considered to be inappropriate material. And by 1967, the code is in its death throes. And Arthur Penn, the director of Bonnie and Clyde, facilitates that death, in a way, with this film. One example of the production code was the caveat that a filmmaker could not show a gun being fired and the victim of the gunfire in the same shot. You will see that caveat violated in Bonnie and Clyde. So the film, in some ways, contributes to the collapse of the production code. The very next year, it falls apart, and in its place is installed the rating system, a preliminary version of what we still have in place today. The film also reflects a fertile period of exchange between American cinema and European cinema, particularly French New Wave cinema. David Newman and Robert Benton, the screenwriters of Bonnie and Clyde, labored for years to make the film, with an eye toward pitching it to the French New Wave director François Truffaut, who turned it down. And you can see evidence of Benton and Newman's love of French New Wave cinema in the final product of the film. And I'll just give you one example of this. It's the repeated use of what's called jump cutting, where the camera will jump in a rather abrupt way from shot to shot. I would also suggest that the fact that Bonnie at one point is sporting a French beret is telling in this regard. Snapshot number 3. The film offers a snapshot of a convention of the gangster genre. The story of an outsider, a marginalized figure, someone striving, in the words of 1930s cinematic gangster Rico Bandello in the film Little Caesar, striving to be somebody. The film borrows the arc, indeed, of traditional 1930s gangster films. As a matter of fact, Warren Beatty pitched the film to Jack Warner, the head of Warner Brothers Studios, as an homage to 1930s gangster film. At which point, Jack Warner is reported to have said, "What the is an homage?" The gangster's rage to be somebody often entails a conflicted desire to achieve a certain kind of class. And class should be understood in 2 ways: a social class standing, but also a certain kind of style or classiness. You can see that in this film through the character of Bonnie Parker. Certain critics have said this film is Warren Beatty's film. He certainly had a hand in making it. The film did not get made without Warren Beatty's star power, and he's a producer of the film. But I would like to suggest this film is really Bonnie Parker's film. What counts as class is fashioned by the mass media. And if you watch the film carefully enough, you can see that this film is really actually very contemporary in its sensibility, to the extent that an individual's desire to be somebody may be shaped by and wrapped up in their experience of mass media, including photography and film, including gangster film. It's not by coincidence that when the film came out and was quite popular, the Bonnie and Clyde style caught on in an illustration of life imitating art. Snapshot number 4, the final one. The film offers a snapshot of the transition from youth to adulthood. It's a movie about a rite of passage. In that sense, the film functions, to my mind at least, like a souvenir, like a photograph. Like a souvenir, the film is imbued with nostalgia, with a longing for a more innocent time. It's made in 1967, but it's set in the early 30s. And that's in part because the real Bonnie and Clyde were active in the early 1930s. But it's also because, in some ways, the film is gesturing toward what, from a certain perspective, might be seen as a more innocent time. That's problematic because it was the Depression. But from a certain point of view, it wasn't as conflicted and marked by upheaval as the 60s. There's also a crucial scene in the film where the gang goes back. I'm not going to give you any plot spoiler, but the gang goes back as though they're going back to a more simple, innocent time. And that scene is shot with a very gauzy filter, as though to suggest a longing for this kind of innocent time. But if the film's a snapshot of the transition from youth to adulthood, it's also imbued with a sense of aching loss, of time's passage, of intimations of mortality. At one point, Bonnie says, "Oh baby, I got the blues so bad." So I'd like to end up here by suggesting that the fact that we're watching a restoration is connected to this idea of the souvenir and the photograph. Why are we interested in a restoration. Film restoration carries the promise of a return to how things really looked originally, in the beginning, when the film was made. Hey, there's Gene Wilder in 4K, looking so innocent at the beginning of his career, his first film role, Bonnie and Clyde. But of course, the sharpness of restoration, like a souvenir, like a photograph, also sharpens awareness about the passage of time. Gene Wilder's no longer with us. Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway no longer look young the way they do on the screen. We can't go all the way back. In this context, one might attend to Gene Wilder's role in the film. I won't give anything away. But one might also attend to a subtle, repeated mechanical sound in the background during the opening scene of the film. It sounds like it might be a working oil well, or it sounds like it might be, from the beginning of the film, the ticking of a clock. On that note, my time is up, but I hope you enjoy the film. Thank you.